Many people are familiar with the figure of Chevalier d'Eon, a cross-dressing spy sent to Russia by France during the reign of Louis XV. He was also a member of the French espionage organization, the King's Secret. Since his story was adapted into an anime in Japan, d'Eon has gained international recognition. His life was filled with dramatic elements: cross-dressing, sexual orientation, transgender identity, espionage, and chivalry. These elements are so rich that they could easily form the basis of a compelling film. However, the historical Chevalier d'Eon differs significantly from his popular cultural image. Born on October 5, 1728, in a declining noble family in Burgundy, Charles de Beaumont's gender at birth has been subject to various interpretations. One popular theory suggests that his mother dressed him as a girl from a young age, raising him as a daughter. However, this theory is now questioned, and recent historical research supports the conclusion that d'Eon was considered male at birth, received traditional male noble education, and grew up as a typical young French man. d'Eon was intelligent and studious. He graduated from the Collège Mazarin in Paris in 1749 and later entered the government service, holding positions such as an administrative officer in the finance department and a royal auditor. Around 1756, d'Eon joined the government's espionage organization, the King's Secret, the first official espionage agency in French history, founded and directly managed by Louis XV. The organization aimed to use espionage and diplomatic networks to place Prince de Conti on the Polish throne, thus turning Poland into a French satellite state. Shortly afterward, d'Eon was assigned an important mission: to go to the Russian court and establish a favorable relationship with Empress Elizabeth to secure her support for Prince de Conti's ascension to the Polish throne and to form an alliance between Russia and France. To successfully complete this mission, d'Eon chose to disguise himself as a woman. This was the first time d'Eon appeared in public as a female, and it was an event that would forever alter his fate and life trajectory. d'Eon adopted the female alias Leah de Beaumont. In Russia, Leah became very popular, especially at the grand masquerade balls held at the court. At the same time, Leah did not neglect her espionage duties, making several secret agreements with pro-French factions in the court and gaining the Empress's trust as her French tutor. With the outbreak of the 7 Years' War, d'Eon was recalled to France by Louis XV to serve as a dragoon officer in the conflict. Towards the end of the war, as France's position became increasingly precarious, Louis XV sought peace with Britain. In August 1762, d'Eon was sent to Britain as an envoy to negotiate peace, returning to his expertise in diplomacy. That same year, d'Eon was awarded the Order of St. Louis, and from then on, he was formally known as Chevalier d'Eon. After the war ended in 1763, d'Eon continued to serve as a diplomat in Britain. However, this time, his work was fraught with difficulties. He was criticized for exceeding the budget due to the excessive import of French wine and was eventually demoted to the position of diplomatic secretary. Discontent with his demotion and feeling underappreciated, d'Eon frequently clashed with his superiors. 6 months later, he was dismissed and ordered to return to France for an inquiry. Outraged, d'Eon tore up the dismissal letter and ignored the summons from France, knowing that returning could lead to imprisonment in the Bastille. He was able to defy the French government due to the significant leverage he held as a former French secret agent with extensive knowledge of state secrets. He threatened to publish his experiences if France abandoned him. Louis XV was furious and ordered d'Eon's extradition. However, the newly ascendant British King George III refused the extradition request, allowing d'Eon to remain in Britain as a private citizen. Yet, d'Eon remained in danger as the French government continued attempts to kidnap and arrest him. In 1764, d'Eon issued a warning and partially fulfilled his threat by publishing a pamphlet, claiming it was the first book of his promised autobiography. This pamphlet elevated Dion's reputation in both British and French circles. In Britain, he became a notable guest in high society, while in France, he was condemned as a traitor. Dion's strategy worked, making him a public figure and complicating any French efforts to move against him. After a protracted struggle, Louis XV and Dion reached a secret agreement. France would pay Dion a lifelong pension of 12,000 livres per year in exchange for Dion's continued espionage work in Britain, including reporting on British political developments and collecting secret documents. From 1770 onwards, Dion's gender became a subject of public intrigue in Britain. Some claimed that Dion had fought in battles and was therefore a man, while others insisted that Dion was a woman and portrayed him as a heroic figure akin to a modern-day Joan of Arc. Over time, more people came to believe that Dion was a woman, and a French nobleman even wrote to a friend, "The whole world says so. It is indisputable." Once rumors began, they were hard to stop. London bookmakers even started taking bets on Dion's gender. His ambiguous stance on the topic only fueled public curiosity. He needed bodyguards when walking on the street because people might try to pull down his trousers to find out the truth. In 1775, with the accession of Louis XVI and a shift towards a peaceful policy, the secret espionage agency was abolished. Pierre de Beaumont, a playwright and French government representative, was sent to negotiate Dion's return to France and to recover any documents related to espionage work. After months of negotiations, Dion signed an agreement. He would relinquish all documents and return to France as soon as possible. The king would repay his substantial debts, continue his pension, and Dion would publicly acknowledge himself as female. We can now say that after years of inner turmoil, Dion chose to abandon his male identity and live as a woman. As early as 1772, when the King's secret espionage organization investigated Dion's gender in London, they concluded that Dion was a woman based on his own statements. Over the years, the French government increasingly believed in Dion's female identity. In 1775, when Beaumarchais visited Dion's home, Dion shared this story. He was born female, but was forced by an abusive father to live as a boy. Dion likely made this claim to clear his name of treason in the eyes of the French public and facilitate his return to France. If he were a woman, it would mean he was a heroine who had sacrificed for the national interest. He portrayed himself as having a tragic childhood, being forced by a misogynistic father to live as a boy, which would garner more sympathy. This plan succeeded, and in 1777, after living abroad for over a decade, Dion returned to his homeland. He was introduced to the court as a woman, and the task of designing his wardrobe was entrusted to the royal dressmaker, Rose Bertin. She reportedly confided to Queen Marie Antoinette, "To be honest, madame, I only know that outfitting such a lady from head to toe is harder than dressing a whole regiment of dragoons." On November 21, 1777, Mademoiselle Chevalier d'Eon made her official debut at the court of Versailles. After a 4-hour transformation that included powdered hair, a meticulously crafted gown, and makeup, she was reborn. After a period of adjustment, d'Eon seemed to embrace her female identity, although reports indicate that she never fully adopted the style of a typical noblewoman. It can be said that only by truly experiencing it could a man understand the extent of the oppression faced by women at that time. This suffering quickly became evident in d'Eon's own life. d'Eon had previously been a high-ranking official and an officer in the dragoons, but after becoming a noblewoman, he found that he had lost his voice. His advice to the king, his opinions on French politics, and his military ideas all became irrelevant. A man who had once yearned to serve his country and had made significant contributions was rendered insignificant after changing his gender. Everyone around him told him to be quiet, as a woman should not discuss such matters. Eventually, an old colleague gave him a sincere piece of advice: find a man to marry. In those times, the only way for a woman to exert any political influence was through marriage. When France joined the American War of Independence in 1778, D'Eon requested permission from the government to once again don her dragoon captain's uniform and fight for France. The government was unmoved and instead pressured her to enter a convent. When D'Eon persisted in her request to participate in the war, she was arrested and thrown into the dungeon of the Château de Dijon. She was released 19 days later after promising not to make any further requests. From that point on, every political effort D'Eon made was harshly rebuffed by the French government, ultimately forcing her to retire to her family estate in the countryside of Tonnerre. During her time abroad, D'Eon often dreamed of returning to her homeland to serve her country. However, after returning, she found these hopes unfulfilled. Disheartened, she returned to Britain in 1785. With the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, D'Eon's pension was discontinued, leaving her without a source of income and soon deeply in debt. As a result, she had to find ways to make a living, including performing duel exhibitions dressed as a woman, a guise she never abandoned for the rest of her life. In 1792, D'Eon had a portrait painted by Thomas Stewart, depicting herself wearing the tricolor symbol of the Republic while still displaying her Order of St. Louis medal on her chest. She also petitioned the new French government to allow her to fight once more, offering to lead a women's battalion for the National Assembly. However, her patriotic fervor was again ignored due to her gender. Her career in fencing exhibitions continued until 1796, when, at the age of 68, she was seriously injured in a match and was forced to retire. Due to her poverty, D'Eon had to share an apartment with another widow named Mrs. Cole. On May 21, 1810, D'Eon passed away in this apartment at the age of 81. When Mrs. Cole prepared her friend for burial, she was astonished to discover that D'Eon was anatomically a fully normal male. There are various theories in the academic world regarding D'Eon's choice to live as a woman. Some suggest he did it to gain certain advantages, while others believe he thought women in the 18th century had higher moral standards than men. Another theory is that he was forced into this role by circumstances. However, it is clear that his decision was unrelated to sexual orientation or sexual preferences. D'Eon was known for his integrity and led a chaste life, which is quite remarkable for an 18th century French nobleman. Modern people often romanticize D'Eon's life, but I believe his life was not romantic at all. Rather, it was quite heartbreaking. Through his experiences, we can observe the societal status of women at that time. The same person, merely by changing gender, saw their dreams and ambitions completely vanish.